everyone, and welcome. I'm Barbara Tien from Project Kin. We are family historians hooked on stories, and we have more ways to tell stories today than ever before. And we gather as Project Kin to sort out the best practices, inspire each other, and fundamentally find new ways to get those stories told. So today's program is our cornerstone for Project Kin, Kathy's Corner, with my dear friend Kathy Stone, who brings to us decades of experience as a photo manager to help us sort through the artifacts, documents, and photographs that are in our family collections, and how to, in this series right now, get to the mysteries of those family photos. So with that as a brief introduction, Kathy, do you want to take it over?
Sure. I'm going to share my screen. Well, first I'll say, give you a little idea of what we're going to do, because I know I have at least two people that I've asked to share timelines they use, being you, Barbara, and Anne, just to mention. And I'll do that at the end. I'm going to talk about what timelines are, show some examples, and do here's categories of things that the sort of the orderly way my brain works. And then we'll look at some varieties. And I'm very happy to have anyone else who has a timeline they use that wants to share it. Happy to have you there. We'll have time for that we'll talk about questions and timelines you've used, even if you don't have something to share, but just to get other input, because it's a pretty broad topic I've found out. So we're going to share our screen. And it's actually working, which is, I always like that. So on the call with Barbara on Sunday, the looking forward to what we were having this week, I mentioned that I had a new mystery. So I thought, well, what a good way to start out exploring our mystery photos. Part 4, I contemplated changing the name to something that took into account timelines. And then I thought, well, I didn't do that soon enough. And it really is part of what we use to explore all of our photos, not just the mystery ones, but we tag it in there and leave it with part of this. So I have a new mystery, and that is a photo I was going through. My grandfather immigrated in 1929, and in 1969, when I was a wee lass of 9 years old, my mother, stepfather, aunt and uncle, and one of my cousins, we all went and took my grandmother back to England. It was the first time she'd been back since she left to come to Canada and do all the farming and stuff and everything. So it was quite a big trip, and we toured all over England. And my mom, I guess that's where I got the scrapbooking from. We collected things from everywhere. I have pieces of toilet paper from bathrooms in England where you had to buy toilet paper and things. Very different than what we had in Canada. There's dried flowers in there that I have to figure out what they might have been before they got to be as old as they are now. I'm not even trying to do that math in my head. But so there's all sorts of things in there, and brochures from everywhere we went. And we traveled all over England. I think we were there for close to 4 weeks. And we rented a car and did a big trip. My aunt and uncle that went with me, my aunt is a maternal aunt, and her husband was also from England, his family. In fact, there's a town named after them, which was Osbaldeston, United Kingdom, and that's their last name. So we visited relatives on all sides of the family, and I think I made the comment, passed on the comment on Sunday, that my cousin, who was 16 at the time and not really enthusiastic about visiting a bunch of relatives and things, and also not too enthusiastic about having this pestery little 9-year-old cousin with him, he commented at one point, "Oh, goody, we visited all the living relatives, and now we're going to go see all the dead ones," as we started touring cemeteries and things. So definitely at his age, not a genealogist, but my mom made a scrapbook, and I was looking through it on the weekend because it's down in my bins of things. I've dug down to there. I need to digitize it. And there was some damage to it. She used white glue to put the pictures in it. It's one of the old paper scrapbooks, not even the nice black ones, but literally the paper ones with the beige paper. And the white glue, don't ever glue things into something you want to keep with white glue, because they're well glued in there. In fact, it's eaten through the photos, and now the photos tear to take them apart. So I had started digging in this bag of memorabilia, hoping I'd find negatives, which I did not. But as I was looking through her album to see how many pages were damaged, this picture fell out. And I have it right here. It's the same picture you see there. I've never seen this picture before. I've looked at that album before, and I do not ever remember seeing it. So this is my new mystery that I have to solve. And so I'm figuring somebody gave it to her on that trip. Because where else would it have come from? Okay, where'd my arrow? There it is. And so I decided, okay, what do I know and what do I have to do next? So I got it on the trip in 1969. There's two girls and one boy, obviously in that age range there of a few years apart. That fits on my grandmother's side because here is my grandmother, her younger sister, and the brother who's just a bit older than my grandmother. One of the girls in the front of that picture looks almost identical to one of my aunts. When I first saw the picture, I thought, oh, who is that with Aunt Jean? And then I realized it's not Aunt Jean because there's no way Aunt Jean was a little girl when they did cabinet cards because she was born in the 30s. So I thought, okay, but it's like it could be her. It's so close. So I'm thinking probably maybe on my grandmother's side. But I've got more to explore now. That cabinet card has a photographer's name on it, very, very faded. So I've got to do some enlarging and darkening and fiddling around trying to see that name. That might give me some help in figuring out exactly where the town that picture was taken, which will help me decide whether it belongs to my grandmother or my grandfather's family. I don't think it belongs to my uncle's family because why would it end up in my mom's scrapbook then? It wouldn't be in there. So I'm thinking somebody had to have given that photo to my mom when we were on that trip. And but we visited relatives of both my grandmother and my grandfather. So it could be any there. The fashion in the photo, not this one we're looking at now, I posted that up to show that the closest in age there. Are there children that fit in the range on my grandfather's side that I have to go look? Because I did the research for my grandmother side of the family, and we have my grandmother was born in 1898, her younger sister in 1900, and her brother in 1895, which would make him about not quite 3 years older than my grandmother. So those are the ones that I've got to try and figure out. But I need to look at my grandfather's side as well. And part of the problem there is there are more kids in his family who didn't live past toddlerhood or who died fairly young. So it's now got to figure out, well, could it be I got to want to look at the ones that survived into adulthood that I have more pictures of, but I also need to look back and see if it's possible it's those kids. So I immediately looked at the timeline that's conveniently been put into Family Search by one of my cousins who's done a lot of that research, and that's helpful to find the ages of the children. So what are we doing? We're going to talk about timelines now. And so this is a slide from last month because one of the things when we were talking about how to identify the mystery photos was in the process was gathering what you know, all the known information, and then creating a timeline and or a family tree. I'm not going to talk about family trees. I'm going to leave that to genealogists to do that part and the information in there. But I showed this picture last time, and that was a portion of the timeline we created in our work area for my client that the collection spans many decades. In fact, it spans 1800s, 1900s, and the 2000s, so several decades. And we developed this over time because I kept forgetting I'd I'd write notes on things, but I kept forgetting it was like, when did they move to Canada? When was so and so born? And I thought, I need this information. I don't want to keep looking in the books or my notebook. I need this where I can just glance at it when I'm trying to sort photos. So came up with this idea to write all the years down and then just wrote relevant notes by each on those dates to try and keep track and make our job easier. Okay. So what is a timeline? I looked at, actually AI helped me out, but they took the definition out of the Oxford Dictionary. And it's a graphic representation of the passage of time as a line or a chronological arrangement of events in order of their occurrences. And I thought, for me, what is a timeline? It's an easy way to capture information in a visual way. Another thing I read about it was, and I think Barbara may have mentioned this too, is it can also, not only does it document all the information you have, it can also expose gaps in the information that you need. It becomes a visual where, oh, there's a big hole in the timeline there that I need to research. It's a great way, for me, it was a perfect way for starting to organize photos, whether they're mystery or not, because it allowed me to move a lot out of the mystery pile as I worked instead of having a whole bunch of things that I didn't know what they were. Like once we started with the timeline, I was able to go back and figure out a lot more things easily without getting into some of the other details we've talked about. So those aren't, I'll talk a bit more about this chart. This one right now, these are, they're copyrighted by a company called My Workflow Studio, who are no longer active. So I know the people who used to run it. I'm gonna get a hold of them and see if they do still sell these timelines, because they're really good because they fill automatically. Like you don't have to keep typing everything. But this would be a more like a grid type line. And so this is my grandparents, and then their kids, the ones that survived. I should probably add the ones that passed away so I can have those dates on this chart too. So it's got the year they were born, and then we start at 1921, which is when they got married, and list, they just automatically filled that. So if we look at the two that were both born in 1938 being twins, okay, I can't scroll on that because it's a it's a screenshot, not an image, so I'll stop trying to scroll down on it. But it very quickly lets you know if you're looking at a year and there's no, if my mom is in it, it's got to be after 1931, not before. So I liked there's the style of this that they, and also it automatically filled all the ages. Like once you put the basic information in it, it auto-filled everything, like the not born, it auto-fills their age in certain years. It auto-filled it all. So that I kind of like that. And then just a representation of another type of timeline. So it's a tool, a timeline is a tool to me for using, as is a family tree, becomes a tool for helping to organize information. And I also think that a timeline can be very useful for writing a story. As a basis, it almost gives you an outline for a story, because most likely we're going to write a story in chronological order and tell it that way. That just seems in our family history to be the logical way to, or picking out a, sorry, part of a story to tell, but it seems logical to be the outline for telling the story. There's all kinds of type lines. Here's a few. These are the one on the far left. You can't even, don't try and read what it says in the boxes because it's whatever they call the, it's a sample of a timeline from Canva. So there's no actual words in there. So that's called a vertical timeline. Then the little one on top in the top right is a horizontal timeline. And the one at the bottom is what I would call a grid timeline. And that's another sample from my Workflow Studios. And this is my child form for me. And what I liked about it, and I mentioned this last month too, was I can write in, and I've got more, obviously, I got a lot more data to fill in here, but I can write in, this was the neat part because school doesn't go by a calendar year, at least where I came from. So this one will show how old I was in the particular year, shows the year I was born. And then also I can put in the grade and the school year. So I went to kindergarten in 1965 to 66, and I can put the name of my school in. I took kindergarten at the church, so that's where I had my kindergarten class. And then I can fill in more events that as I find them. And then my elementary years, and there's an anomaly in mine because if you'll notice, it's grade 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. I didn't do grade 4. I skipped over grade 4. So there's no grade 4. And that would probably be something I should put a note of for future reference to go, what happened? Because if you put a grade 4 in there, it will mess the whole timeline up. So then it lists all my schools. So I think I would say that's sort of a grid type of a timeline. How do you create them? Easiest, handwritten. And that's, you can, and that's what I showed the example. I blew up a section of the one that was tacked to the wall that didn't have a lot of, information on it I had to white out. So that was 1933. Ted graduated from high school. So just dates to help figure out other stuff. And the other ones had a lot more on them. You can use a spreadsheet. I'm a fan of spreadsheets, and in researching this, I had an enlightening moment that I can't say I learned something new because I knew you could do this, and I've done it in work situations, but you can create charts and things out of your spreadsheets, which look an awful lot like timelines then. So that was sort of like, oh, yes, that would be brilliant. And we used to do all kinds of things in different ways. So that's an example of a spreadsheet, and I'm going to show you more detail of that one in a couple minutes and some of the things you can do with that. There's tons of templates. If you Google timeline templates, you can find all kinds of templates that you can modify to meet your needs. And timeline programs, Canva program, template, whichever you want to call it. Canva has timeline program where you can choose a style and then fill all your information in. So you could actually do it in Canva. I had to mention Canva because I know it's one of Barbara's favorites, but I'm becoming more of a fan of it too. So, and then Barbara, when she talks to us about her Lafayette timeline, used an online resource called Night Lab. So there are programs to do that, to create your timesheets. What I would suggest is thinking about, how does your brain work? How do you process information? Like I said, I love spreadsheets, and I have a bunch of different books, and I was thinking that I made a note that what I need to do with this spreadsheet when I show you is I need to make links so I can link where a comment on the first page has something to do with another page where I can just make clickable links for things, but I haven't done that yet. But it could be done, and that's it. So how do you think? How does your brain work? Are you visual? Do you want more with pictures in it? You don't, it's like, oh, I don't want to look at spreadsheets. Blah. I don't want to look at a whole bunch of words, but however you create it, it needs to fit what makes sense to you more than going, oh, okay, if Kathy says she likes spreadsheets, I should do a spreadsheet. No, if you want something more visual, it's more, pick something that looks like something that you would like, that makes sense to you, and that you'll complete. Because that's the biggest concern too, is if you don't, if you're doing something that becomes a job or a chore, you're probably not going to do it. So think of it as, how do I look up my information, and how do I need to find it? And as I mentioned with the one we did by hand, I could have done that on a spreadsheet, but then I would have had to look at the spreadsheet every time I wanted to look up information. And I wanted a visual at the moment. All that information has been taken off and put into a spreadsheet, because it isn't really that convenient when you're creating a digital archive to put a whole, like a whole bunch of scans of these sheets in. So it's been moved over onto a spreadsheet. But templates, Barbara gave a tip in the Lafayette session, was start with a goal in mind of what you want, and don't be tempted by new technology. Don't look for a technology to use and then try and fit what you want into it. Think what you want to do and then find the technology. And I upped this one. This was we had this in the last month too, but I thought, well, there's many more things to think of. But what goes in a timeline? Almost anything goes in a timeline. Whatever you want to do, and you can do a timeline on a project basis. It doesn't have to be an entire, like the Lafayette project. I'm thinking what I want to do is, for my grandparents who immigrated, I want a timeline of what was happening when they immigrated, and because they immigrated to a farm, and then they lived on the farm from 1929 until, I got to look the exact date up, sometime during the Second World War. My grandfather joined the Canadian military in the Second World War and left because he had to go away. And so my grandmother couldn't manage the farm anymore, so she moved to town. So those things would go on a timeline to give ideas that could be helpful in telling their story, but also in figuring out where picture, like if it's a picture on the farm, it has to have been taken before 1945 when they left the farm. So a timeline doesn't have to be everything. It can just be something for a project you want to do. But some of the things that you might want to put on the timeline: names and ages of family members, where people lived. Location timeline can be very helpful. places where they took very repeated vacations, the dates they took all these vacations to somewhere. Holiday properties, and I use that in a loose term. I have family with a cabin, and we've gone up to their cabin almost every year. But we always went with my mom. And so listing the dates, that's in a lot of pictures. So part of what this also gives you on a timeline are keywords to put into your images. If you're keywording to have search terms, so I could put in there Lake Baptiste, winter cabin, and then I could search that keyword and find all the pictures from that location. So that's something else to keep up. My mom and I, when we were on our own, we camped a lot at a place called Half Moon, not the one by Barbara there, a different Half Moon. At that point, it was called Half Moon Lake. I've Googled it recently. It's now called Half Moon Resort. It was definitely Half Moon Lake when we camped there, because it was all camping. They've got all the fancy RV places now, but it was literally like you had tent sites. So there's a lot of stories there than things that not I might not necessarily have pictures of, but stories I remember, and that'll be a trigger then to add those stories in. The historical events that took place around a certain time frame in your family. So you may not be doing a historical timeline, but information on, for example, World War II is relevant in my grandparents' timeline because my grandfather, that's when he went and joined the Canadian Army, and that leads to another whole sequence of events. Where was he stationed? He started, I think at one point he did his training in Calgary, did his he was stationed out in Vancouver for a while on the coast of Canada because he was in the regiment for the older gentleman, because he was older by the time he was in the British military in World War One. So by the time he joined for World War Two, he was quite a bit older. But he was in the Veterans Guard of Canada. So they were first they were guarding the coast. They were just sitting out on the coast guarding it from the Japanese, and then they moved him to I told the story before, a prisoner of war camp that's located just outside of Calgary. And he spent quite a bit of time there. And then at the end of the war, he went back to Europe to go on the boats when they returned the German prisoners back to Europe. And then he actually went home that time to visit his own family in England. But it can be very relevant to situate family events in your family history that took place around historic events. And I know I mention all the time, like pandemic of 2020 has to be an important event for our recent life because it changed our lives. And so it's something that probably would go on anyone. Other events, family pets, any special traditions that can go on an information timeline. I always talk grades in school information, things like fashion, when people got glasses, because I use that as a timeline for my kid. One of my sons, well, my other son is supposed to wear glasses, but he just doesn't. But one of them had to wear glasses. So it's like, when did he get his glasses? And then I know, and that's just a thing. Okay, he had glasses from age 6. He got his glasses in grade 1. So pictures without his glasses are automatically, I'm looking before grade 1. And hairstyles, we can look more broadly at different hairstyles with the ages. We talked a bit about that before. Kids with braces, that's a good one too, because usually those are for a certain period of time and can give you a distinctive time period that to help you identify those photos. Hobbies is something else that I would include in a timeline. My kids did, I guess, sports. It should be a life event. My children they played hockey and baseball and all those other sports, but we did martial arts. We did kung fu from a very traditional martial arts studio, and it became not only like a sport, but it became like a way of life because Chinese New Year, our school always performed at all these things, and we performed when restaurants opened. So it's a big thing in our life. And if I can mark down, where they were, when did they get their belts, um, as they progressed, and all that information, it's a way to collect all that and then have it written for part of the story and having it all noted in one place. vacation timelines, all sorts of things. So it's really up to you what makes sense to put on your timeline. And that's what I think is a beauty of a spreadsheet or a grid, is that I can just delete this columns I don't want and make columns that I need. Okay. Examples of timelines. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. Well, actually, I'm going to share something else. So I think I have to stop that share. And then I'm going to share again, and I'll just quickly show you. Let me just make sure I've got to get out of that. And then I want to look at this. Okay, so this is just taking me a minute or two. Share. There it is. Share. So this is a Google Doc or a Google Sheet that is one of the different things that I have. And it's not got I just added a little bit to it because actually I have one that's pages long with all my clients' information in it, but I thought probably shouldn't be sharing that right now. So I just threw a few of my own examples in. So this is the people one, and I call it a keyword sheet because that's partly what I'm using, but we listed all the people that showed up in all the family members, and then started with nicknames because the client I did a lot of work on, they had so many nicknames for people, and like they were originally from the southern US, so, and particularly in Texas, so we had Nana and Mima and Nam, all those expressions. And so, and in my family, we called my grandmother Grammy. That was her nickname wasn't grandma or anything, like we called her Grammy. Grandpa was grandpa. Um, my kids call my husband and I Mama and Papa, not mom and dad. So all those kind of nicknames can go in there. Also, we have in my client, we have we have a bunch of people named after an ancestor. So we named somebody after the dad, but we never used junior. And I said, well, can't we just write junior so I can keep them straight? No, they were never junior, never used it. So they all have nicknames to fit in there. And so that's an important thing to know. And also because it's like, well, I don't really want to write in a description on a photo every time I run into that person. I don't want to write all the other things they were known of. It's enough to do birth name, married names, etc., let alone writing down, okay, well, this one is this Theodore is Ted. His son, who was also Theodore, is Sid, and now he's calling himself Ted. And the grandson who's Theodore, is TJ. Like, you need to know all these things, and that's where the name they go by, and then all the nicknames. And so I'm like, I don't know any other nicknames for me, but this was my name at birth. But I've also got to put in my spreadsheet somewhere my name when my stepfather adopted me, and then my married name. And so that will all go in columns along there. And then I quickly did a little, just for example here, pardon me for the yellow highlights, or in the client, they've gone through and highlighted what should go in as a keyword versus just information. And so I started off, so of important places is the Hodgson Farm in Islay, Alberta. And I've got the geolocation, so I'll put that in there so you can actually look it up on a map. We just called it the farm, so not a nickname. Got there in 1929. I've got more notes to write. But the other cool thing is you can actually plot pictures into a spreadsheet. So I threw in a picture of the farm when there, and I know I have pictures of when I get to Vermilion, there's pictures of that. And then my grandparents stayed there forever, and Edmonton will start with my mom. And then at some point, my grandparents moved to Edmonton. So that will become part of the information in there. And then events. So I talked about camping at Half Moon Lake, visits to the Baptiste cabin. I was not a terribly athletic person. I have a few athletic achievements to put in there. And I spelled Chinese wrong because I was doing this quickly, but high school debate tournaments. When I was in high school, I debated. I went in a whole bunch of tournaments all over a series of years. And so that might be something that I'd list as events and the time they took place. Chinese New Year celebrations. Okay, I got to edit Chinese because that's going to make me crazy. There. Okay, now I'm not going to go crazy over the misspelled word, but then I can go through and put events that are relevant into there, and I've got lots of columns to put dates, stories in here, and reference pictures. I'm not going to put all my pictures in a spreadsheet. Like, that's not my thing. My pictures will be elsewhere, but I can toss a couple pictures in, and then I can probably link them to where the actual photographs are in the spreadsheet. So it's like a collection of all my information. Um, Businesses and associations, I have nothing in there yet, but I would put those in. Important dates. So I took all the names out of this, but these were all the important dates from my client where something happened. Somebody was born, something happened, they moved, um, they lived somewhere else. So it goes all the way up to 2012 for that particular client, because the my client's father, and we start in 1840 with one of the ancestors' births. So all this stuff in timelines. So, okay, I've got to find the stop share. And what else did I want to mention? Well, let's talk about your timelines instead. Let's do that before we talk about other resources and things. So, Barbara, do you want to talk about Lafayette first, or we want Anne to talk about the fashion one?
Oh, I think we want Anne to talk about the fashion one.
Okay, go
But
for it, Anne. You can
while
either
Anne,
talk or share your screen or.
No, I don't need to share a screen because
Okay.
you said about make a timeline that suits you. I'm a visual person and I'm a low-tech person. So this is my timeline.
Oh, wow.
oh,
So if you bear with me, I'm just going to adjust my camera because I
Yes,
tried to hold this up to the camera earlier and it collapsed. So
it's a bit heavy. So,
hopefully you can see the folder okay now. Inside my folder, the first page is the
wow.
timeline that I start with. This has got all the different types of photographs that you're likely to find in a family history collection with the sort of decades when they're available. And the darker bands are the most likely dates and the lighter bands are the range. This is in the UK, so it's slightly different around the world. But Kathy, I don't think there's that much difference, is there?
No, I don't. And it's funny, Anne, because I was thinking this morning, I need to make a timeline of phototypes. And there you are and I forgot to mention that as a possible timeline. And now you have. Wonderful.
I'll email it to you.
We think alike.
Okay, so this is the start point. So I start with a photograph, and based on the type, it kind of gives me a rough date to go to. And once I've done that, that's when all of these tabs come in at the side, because there's two tabs at the front for daguerreotypes, which were the earliest photographs, and then ambrotypes. And then all the rest of the tabs along the side are in decades. And the more you do this, the more likely you are to be able to pin a photo down to a decade.
Yes.
So that comes with practice. But the idea was I was going to build up this reference folder because I'd started collecting magazine clippings and dated photographs and that sort of thing. So I thought if I put those into a timeline in order, I could just kind of browse through this and match things up. So inside each section, there's like clippings that I've got out of magazines. Hope you can see that okay. And also there's dated photographs that I know the dates of and the points at the bottom that are significant of those. So the idea is if you just get a photograph, you just browse through, and if it's a daguerreotype, there's a selection of different daguerreotypes that you can match up the fashions, but also the style of the mat in the frame as well. This can give you dating clues as well. So that's the kind of thing that is similar to ambrotypes, the cased images as well. So again, magazine articles and lots of dated images that you can compare to fashion styles, hairstyles, all those kind of things as well. And then within the decades from 1860 onwards, that's really when carte de visites came in. That's these kind of little size cards. So that's typical of them. And then what you can do, exactly the same again, lots of articles, highlighted bits that are interested, and then lots of dated photographs. So the idea is you could just come along with your photograph, browse through until you match up, and you can find the fashion that matches. And then, for example, men's baggy trousers is a good one apparently for the 1860s. So there's loads of those like that, and it goes on and on and on. And each decade, as you can see, is got the same idea. With some of them, there's lots more magazine articles like this one. If there's like lots of detail pointing out things, these are really useful. So I had all these magazines, and I decided I really needed them all in one place. So that's basically it. It goes up to the 1850s, 1950s, and up to today. So you'll recognise some of these as more recent photographs as well. And again, different fashions that you can follow. So that's my idea of a timeline, very low tech and very visual. And I find it really useful. It's nice just to browse through, and you find the more you use it as well, the easier you are to match up and find things.
Mm.
Oh,
That's great,
hello
Anne.
again. That's my timeline.
That's brilliant. And a
So,
good example of a different type of one
yeah,
that works. And that's what I'm saying. It works for you, but it's brilliant.
exactly.
Yeah.
And it was a way of getting all my magazine clippings and pictures all organized as well, but very low tech. But I like just looking at it and
Yeah.
browsing through it, as I said. So
I
Well, it's still,
love,
go
uh,
ahead,
uh,
Barbara.
I was just going to say, I love the idea of something that it's like Montessori in the sense that it's sensorial. It uses our tactile experience of turning the pages combined with our pattern recognition in our memories. You know, we casually say, I'm visual, I'm a visual learner or whatever. But in fact, when you get back to it and you look at, learning by patterns, and flipping through cards, the act of flipping through the same cards over and over and over and over and over again, there are things that your brain recognizes that you don't even have words for. And I think that's incredibly important. I love that example, and I love bringing it up in the context of a timeline. It's not a book about fashion through the decades, it's a timeline that you use for pattern recognition and sorting and understanding. Wow, brilliant. You
I've
should
got
And
a
write a
shelf,
book.
having it
got literally a shelf.
all at your fingertips. I think that's what
Yeah.
it is a timeline, and it's a timeline of all your useful resources, so that you aren't digging through all your magazine things, even or file folders or anything. It's just all right there. Wow.
And I've I've got a load of books, like you said, of fashion and that, and you tend to dip in and out of those. But I was like you, working through a stack of books to find something. But I just found this was a really good way of doing it, an easy way. And I'm a kind of a stationary, kind of coloured tab, kind of folder type person. So exactly as you said, Kathy, do it what appeals to you and what works for you. So,
Yeah.
and I know I could just probably put it in AI and it would tell me what date it was. But where's the fun in that? This is
And
fun.
and that's kind of what I mean about sensorial things that are,
Mm,
crafty is how we diss them today, but things that have you getting your hands dirty, that get you actually getting your hands and manipulating things is incredible for actually learning the stuff. And so,
mm.
yeah, I've talked endlessly about my Lafayette timeline, and it was in some ways a digital experience of doing that because I knew nothing about American history. It's just dreadful. History is on the whole. But when I gave myself a specific task to go through and do this thing,
We lost your sound, Barbara.
yeah, but am I back now?
You're back
Yes.
now. Okay.
Usually it blips. Um, when I gave myself a task to engage with the time, and in the process, kind of understanding how the time. Oh, right now you're not going to work. Thank you very much. Yeah, there it is. Okay. So it gave me a way to, in manipulating it, I could start to recognize what didn't make sense in going back and forth. I won't waste your time with all of this, but I want one of the things that I found such a fascinating thing in doing it was a discovery that in stepping through what this guy's historical experience had been in each of these places, that in fact there was something. Oh, right. It's broken. Of course it is. Of course you're broken because you didn't refresh. To go through and think about that experience for this aristocrat's tour around early America, early United States, to what it was like for him and what he was thinking. So I realized I had to bring in events that were anniversaries. They weren't happening at the time, they were anniversaries of a historical perspective. And then, of course, I dove in and started to better understand. This example is one of my favorites because it puts them together in the timeline, which was the anniversary of the time they decide to challenge Cornwallis at Yorktown. And then, 3 weeks later, they actually succeed at the Battle of Yorktown. And so I put in a video. And this is a video from the musical Hamilton. I won't play for you right now, but it's kind of sweet when you look at it in context. I'll let you go back and look at that in your own timeline. But it was, in many ways, to me, it was the manipulation of that information, just like you flipping through the pages and inserting things. And as you and your brilliance, Kathy, have introduced to me from day one, was the notion of sort then scan, and the notion of using 3x5 cards, which I have handy at all times, little 3x5 colored 3x5 cards, no less, to keep track of what you did and where it is. Brilliant.
Anybody else want to share how you use timelines, or everybody wants to go now and create?
Jennifer, mute.
Jennifer.
I do that all the time. I use them all the time in my research. If I'm going to write a post about an ancestor, I always use the timeline. If I haven't got one done, I'll do it before I write the post. But it's mainly to pick up, just as Kathy was saying, gaps in the research. I find it fantastic for that. I haven't used timelines as a display type thing, but that was really great, Kathy, and Anne. It's just amazing, your book there. But yeah, so Kathy, you've given me some ideas of how I could perhaps use them for display if any of my family might be interested in looking at them. That's the big question, isn't it? But yeah, it's endless, isn't it? What you can do with them. You know, I'd never really thought of using them for vacations, for example. I think that would be just wonderful to have a timeline of your vacations, your special vacations.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, lots of things swimming in my head now.
Well, and I think that's what appeals to me about timelines is the endless possibilities. Like, as I said, I had been thinking about this, and I was thinking, oh, I should make one up of, which I would have done to show, but now Anne has hers, so I'm done. Of the types of photos, I thought that's information would be really good. That would be perfect on a timeline. So
Yeah.
I'm now inspired to actually do that. So it's I think that the possibilities are endless, and it's just a way to keep all that pie. And I feel like something like that, or using like a visual timeline to pass on our family history and stories, may be more interesting to the future or our current descendants who we want to give this stuff to. It might be more interesting to them to be able to visualize this stuff in a timeline instead of having to go through books upon books upon books.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think I'm very visual because I'm working on that client, because I have to finish that poor client's job. It's just so much stuff. I'm working now on dealing with all the scan stuff and adding all the information to it. And I've had a couple days where I was like, darn, I wish I had those big sheets of paper posted up around my office, because it's way easier than having to go back and get back into the Google sheet to look up times and frames and things. So I think I like the visual too. And I'm just like, I wish I had, I'm trying to remember now where we put those sheets. I think they're still at my client's house there with all the photos and stuff. I don't think I have them, but I thought I could find enough walls in my office to stick them on, and or else put them on a visual timeline instead of a document, because I am finding myself going, oh, where is that thing? And it's not here anymore. But
yeah.
Does anyone else use timelines?
One thing I wanted to add to that was after I did my Lafayette talk, I was thinking about lots of extensions from it. I mean, the core elements really have to do with the display of an image, a picture against a timeline. That's it. And I happened to have two people ask me within hours of each other who do not know each other, and honestly didn't even know about my timeline, whether it could be used for a journal, a travel journal. So essentially, instead of thinking about it of now, let me take all the things that I know about something and put it on the timeline, let me take my journey and add journal entries. And the output later is to go back and, oh, look at this. Now looking at it as a big, long timeline. And so I created a form that fills that in and executes that for somebody to play with. And I'm waiting for candidates to play with it. I have a candidate who is working on it, but she's in her trip, so I'm staying out of her way. You know, I think time is such an obvious thing that we inherently, you know, work with, along with maps, you know, place and space and time. And thinking about ways to leverage that and visualize it, I think of it as not just a tool during your writing of your project, but rather it can be a place setting, a table where you then bring other people in to discuss their parts of that story. I'm thinking what you've just described, I'm going to start bringing my own timeline of my nuclear family and then extend it out to my siblings and extend it out to my cousins. And pretty soon we're thinking about where we all were when JFK was killed, or, you know, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can quickly show you another one that I've just done. This might be a project down the road, Barbara. Right now, it's just very, very early on. What am I looking for? Share. Share. I just did this. This is going to actually go in. For me, I'm a big scrapbooker. Can you see that? But I sat down on Google Maps. So this is a trip we took in 1999, January, or not January. So this is a map of Alberta. And we started in Calgary, where we live, and then took this in a motorhome trip with my kids. And so this was our journey to the end, and then we came back the same way into Calgary. But to me, it's another form of timeline. I've still got to add all the information to it, but it is another type of timeline that I've been doing more of those with our trips, just to show where did we go on those trips.
Yeah. The good people from Night Lab have another tool called Story Map. Funny thing you say that, which is a low-end version of, thank you, a low-end version of something from ArcGIS called Story Maps. And yeah, I've been thinking about working on that too, getting that going. There's a lot of stories that do
share my
that.
screen one more time here, just to show you one of the big now. Just hang on. Okay, that's not good because I'm not on the right thing. Let's go back here and get onto there. That's what I want to show you. So share just some resources for you. And I started with one of my favorites, Cyndi's list, as a starting point, because I Googled templates I Googled timelines, and you get into a lot of project management stuff that you're adapting to our own purpose. And I thought, yeah, this is boring. So I found this for Cyndi's list, and it'll be in the references, but she's got a whole section on timelines and a bunch of different categories. So there's lots of resources there. I checked out a couple. I didn't go through them all because there's really a lot. And Barbara will put them in the resource sheet with that. But again, cyndislist.com timelines is, and she's got them split into general resources, historical, interactive online, locality or ethnicity specific, publication, software and supplies, and templates and forms are all split out there for us. So it's good. It gives you a place to start. Like I started off with Google, and I was like, oh, there's just too much on here. But
Sometimes
indeed, I was very impressed with some of the potential. Canva seems to really like horizontal or vertical timelines, though. They don't seem to be too fond of horizontal ones. They're really big on the vertical ones. So, and
I think
doesn't
that's because they started out from things that are going to be web or print, and
Yeah.
web scrolls this way very easily.
Exactly. Yeah.
The other angle to use that, though, is the Canva whiteboard feature, one of
Yeah.
my all-time favorites, because you
Yes.
can basically make something very, very high resolution and then let you zoom in and out of it. So you can have a whole ridiculously long thing of the history of all time, and you can't even see it all at once, but then you can zoom in and out. That's very useful because you're really only looking at a little bit at a time. But it's very helpful to have a larger context to be able to go back and say, wait a minute,
So
that was the
lots of
17th century.
like lots of things that, and I'm in the I'm always in the old keep it simple. Like, what does it work for you, and keep it. And I know, Barbara, with your technical background, the technical comes into it. But for some of us, like I like Anne's book, but it's again, it's whatever makes most sense to you, and I think that's the most
Exactly.
important point. Is whatever you can easily create, and if that's an organized book like Anne showed us, or a spreadsheet like I'm using, or whatever, or your timeline, Barbara, for Lafayette, they're all great resources for our organizing. And also, I'd like to the storytelling, which is what we're all about here, telling those stories, those family stories. I think timelines make it easier for me. As I start to think about things, it's helping me as I make a timeline. For example, I'm starting to remember the stories even more than necessarily a photo, because when I started on writing the camping, I don't have a whole lot of pictures of it when we were camping, because we camped in a tent and it rained a lot when we were camping. And we camped in a tent on the ground with 2 dogs, and sometimes the dogs would be floating on air mattresses in the morning because it rained really bad. So, and again, this is not in the digital camera area, so you didn't even pull the camera out very often, because it was probably sitting in the car being protected from all this dirt and campfire smoke and everything else. So there's not a lot of pictures, but thinking about it and just looking at the pictures online of the lake brings back a lot of memories. And
I have a
that's
project idea.
Huh?
That gives me a project idea. May I share it? May I share it with the class? May I, please?
yeah.
If you've got a timeline, let's say a timeline of who went to school where and when, and you get a Zoom call together with your cousins that you grew up with, or your classmates, a group of people that share that timeline. You share the screen of that timeline, and you start doing what I'm doing now in recording this. You start recording the conversation, and then go around the room and have people telling what they remember about that event.
Oh,
Now,
yeah.
the output of that is not a story, or is it? Well, I don't care. It's a whole lot of stories. They are memory droplets that are shared. And you know what? They're preserved automatically. It's just a video. Now, whether you take that to the next level by putting those droplets into some shared thing, you know what? That's not that hard these days. Let's deal with that tech. That's the tech, blah, blah, blah. The really powerful thing is capturing those memories, and the timeline is setting the table. It's like a dinner party. It's set the table, and then you bring people in and talk about their memories. That's it.
It's a great, yeah, no, I think it's brilliant. And I think actually a lot of project ideas in there. Go ahead, Linda.
Okay, Barbara, you know the project we did with the pictures?
Yes, your diary, your grandmother's diary.
Okay, so I guess you could make a timeline out of that even, couldn't you? Because
Sure
we
could.
start and went
Just
around.
draw the lines. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess you could. Well, I'm just trying to think how I would put something like that together.
Well, if I may expand on that, that is a piece that you created as a giant poster in
Yeah.
Canva and
Yeah.
then printed it as a poster and distributed it as a poster. You can reopen that digital file,
Yeah.
draw the line between them, perhaps put in additional points that may never be printed, that are reference historical events, or even shade that back and put the historical event. So you have different ways of looking at the same thing. And then, as I said, get everybody together to recall their references. They're memory triggers.
Yeah.
That's what a
Yeah.
photograph is. You know,
Yeah.
it's not the memory, it's the trigger.
Well, I wrote the little story that went with it, but I guess you could break it down into a timeline, couldn't you?
Yeah, just draw a line between them,
Like
because each
the-
one has a date, right?
Had a date. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I
That
gotta
would make
And
a
I
good one.
I love that idea of repurposing other
Yeah.
things that have started.
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah,
Mm.
bravo.
I think that's about all I had. If we have any more questions or other ideas, we can share them, or I'll turn it back over to Barbara, or can I share my coming soon news?
Yes, please.
So after hanging out with Barbara for all these years, I'm in the middle, because I think I've mentioned it before, I'm kind of retired, trying to retire. As soon as that job's done, I'm going to be retired, but I'm still going to offer what I do. Like, Miss Gill, never retire from Kathy's Corner and doing that. And I'm still going to offer a little bit of consulting to people who want to organize their own photos. I'm not going to organize other people's photos anymore, because it's very physically demanding, and it's usually pressure, and I try to eliminate that from my life. So Barbara has convinced me that I'm going to start a Substack for my company, Calgary Photo Solutions. And so Barbara's helping me work on it right now. So coming soon, you will be getting invites to join my Calgary Photo Solutions page. And I will be maintaining my close affiliation with Barbara and Project Kin, and sort of will separate these things by really technical. My own page will deal with a lot more. I'm going to blog there for one, and if I finally retire, I might actually be able to write blogs, and we're going to shift back and forth. If it's something that fits our Project Kin audience, we're going to share it there. If it's something that's more technical or geared to a different audience, or just sort of my ramblings for the day that I'm going to start writing down, it'll be on my Calgary Photo Solutions one. But keep an eye out for that, because it should be
Yeah.
coming soon.
Oh, good.
Yay. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I'm delighted as always. It's always such fun to have all of you who've come to know each other and build this as a community, getting to know each other and connect and share these passions for telling our stories in creative ways that are truthful and focused and thoughtful, and learning from each other, while at the same time pushing creative new ways to do things in different ways that inspire us even more. So thank you all. And with this, let me end the program today and toss it off to the recording, and always look forward to your thoughts and insights in the comments and the rest of it. And those of you who weren't able to join us on the live program, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Kay. Politics, but thank you, thank you, thank you. Always wonderful.
Thanks,
Enjoy your
Barbara.
days, enjoy your evenings.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.